Same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him. Without him was not anything made that was made. So when you find a grace manifest in the Old Testament, it's because the patriarchs met the pre-incarnate. We project that scripture. The true blessings are not the things we get from God. They're actually the places we are permitted to go in God. He said, blessed is the man whom thou choosest and caused to approach unto thee, that he may dwell in thy courts. He said, we shall be satisfied with the goodness of thy house, even of thy holy temples. So as we begin to press into God, he opens up layers and allows us to experience multifaceted dimensions. And so in this conference, one of the burdens we sustained was to know what it means to stand and to represent God as legislators. And I began by telling us that priesthood is the reason we were created. He said, I've made you a kingdom of priests and of kings. So the kingdom God is raising or creating is one that should be populated only by priests and by kings. And I said, as you are dealing with priesthood, you will discover that priesthood is a world, is a realm of realities. And in order for us to have accurate understanding, before we begin to look deeply into the dimension that we are considering and will be considering even in much details this morning, I showed us 5 major dimensions of priesthood. And I said the first dimension of priesthood is to minister to the Lord. And I said ministering to the Lord entails you interacting with a dimension of God and honoring that dimension. He said, separate unto me Aaron and his son, Exodus 28 verse 1 and 2, that they may minister unto me in the priest office. He said in Acts 13 from verse 1 and 2, how that the teachers and prophets that were in Antioch, they fasted and they ministered unto the Lord. And I gave us a graphic illustration of ministering to the Lord in the life of Hannah. He said, there's none holy as the Lord. She was just contemplating God and eulogizing him, honoring him, praising him, and exalting him for the dimension she had comprehended. I said the second dimension of priesthood is to behold him, because you appreciate his essence, and so you are never tired of looking upon his countenance. And I said it's in beholding that we are changed. He said we all with open faces. When you see people pray and they are not transformed, it's because their prayer is not priesthood. Because cardinal in priesthood is the act of beholding, and if you behold him, you'll be changed. And then I went further. I said third in the dimension of priesthood is the act of waiting. If a man cannot wait on God, then he has not discerned his majesty. He still assumes God is a friend that he can book an appointment with and is timing him. God is a king. When you come to him, you wait. Moses used 40 days to climb Sinai, and he waited for another 8 days for God to show up. Because the goal is not that you have prayed. The goal is that the presence of God descended and God spoke to you. Because the power of prayer is not what you say, it's what God says to you. What you say is an attempt to hear him say something to you. You are not powerful in prayer because you can say a lot. You are powerful in prayer because you can hear a lot and you can obey a lot. And so it will take perfecting the act of waiting to be able to journey in the corridor of priesthood. And then number 4, I said priesthood has to do with participation. Because when you come to a realm long enough, that realm will lend itself to you. And so you begin to touch things that are in that realm. Those things you touch is what gives you the right to address your generation. Because your generation is in need. They are not looking for talkers. They are looking for witnesses. And it is what you have seen and handled that you can deliver to a generation. And so what priesthood will do and insist on is that you must touch something so you become a representative and an embodiment of that dimension. If you have not touched anything, you can't address your generation. He said that which was from the beginning, First John chapter 1 from verse 1, which we have heard, which we have looked upon, and our hands have handled of the word of life. He said that is what we have come to commit to you. And I said, when you attain these 4 levels, then you come to the final realm of priesthood that entails more of prayer. And that realm of priesthood is what we call legislation and litigation. And I say legislation is the act of enacting spiritual laws and ordinances, while litigation is the act of enforcing spiritual laws and ordinances. So in priesthood, cardinal in your prayer is the ability to create change, because you have the power through God to establish his dominion and to establish his mandate. Now, it's possible for you to think these things are casual things, because you probably have not understood that everywhere humankind find expression, spirits are interested in those realms. Because currently the earth is the spectacle of all of God's creation. If you have studied the Bible and understanding has been granted you, one thing you will realize is that the Bible says God sits in the cycles of eternity. God is on a project of creation, and creation did not begin with us, neither will it end with us. That's why when you go to heaven, you have elders, you have thrones, you have dominions, you have principalities, you have powers, you have archangels. All kinds of spirits are there because they represent different dispensations of the creations of God. And when God was done, he decided to invade and create a visible realm, and then he created man. In Ephesians chapter 1 verse 10, when this creation is over, God will wrap it away and start another project. But for now, earth and man is God's youngest creation, and so every spirit is interested in earth and man. So anywhere you find men, spirits are interested. And one thing God did was to give man the authority to superintend over his realm. And so if man must live to serve the will of God, then he must learn spiritual intelligence to be able to defend his borders. For example, the responsibility of defending Kenya is not for the United States. The responsibility of defending Kenya is for Kenyans. So if Kenyans don't learn how to build a defense system to defend Kenya, then Kenya will be in trouble. And if Kenya is in trouble, the business will collapse, the schools will collapse. For example, because Ukraine, now with so much compassion I'm saying this, because Ukraine could not defend their borders from Russia, activities are on a halt. So defenses in the spirit are the most cardinal responsibilities of believers, because if a territory is not defended, nothing else can work. If your body is attacked with sickness now, you won't be here praising God. Even the food that you think you love, you won't eat. The car you want to drive, you won't drive. The projects you are handling, everything will stop. And so priesthood, particularly legislation and litigation, becomes very important, because it is the only basis by which spirits that wants to hijack the agenda of God are stopped, and a corridor is created for God and God alone to have access and the right of way. And so it's important for us as a church to train people and to build them up to learn the art of territorial defense. Because if our ranks are depleted in territorial defense, then the purpose of God will not find expression. And that's not the only problem. The major problem is that demons and devils will take over to fulfill their agenda, and so our existence will become useless. Let me read the scripture for you as I attempt to show you why legislators must rise and who they are and the authority levels they must enter. Because as legislators, there are things we can do, but the things we can do are tied only to our authority level, not what we desire. You may want to see certain things happen. Your desire is not enough. It's your authority that will make it happen. And so we will not only teach people why they must be legislators, we need to teach them what they must do in order to be legislators, to assess the kind of authority that is required to uninstall and to dethrone princes in darkness, so that the will of God can find expression. But if you don't know this, you may assume that these things are just fairy tales. But this is how civilizations are shaped. I usually call it spirit cities. Every nation is a spirit city. There are spirits transacting actively in every nation. We were sharing some burdens yesterday that unfortunately are not things you can casually say until you have clearance. How that even bilateral relationship between nations are negotiated based on certain agreements that defy the soul structure of the inhabitants of those nations. There are many nations in Africa today that have certain kinds of visas to other Western nations only if they agree to certain demands. And you'll be shocked that those demands are not economic demands. That they can give a country the right to access certain kinds of visa for certain period of time because they accept gay, because they accept LGBTQ. How does LGBTQ impact on economy? And so if you don't allow LGBTQ, then your country will not be granted certain number of years for certain visas. How does LGBTQ affect visa? Because they know that the spirit of perversion is the doorway to the Antichrist. And they know that God hates perversion. If you study the Bible, anytime there's perversion, God destroys completely. When angels slept with the daughters of men, God told Noah to build an ark quickly. He destroyed the whole earth. Because the moment perversion comes, the ordinances of God can never stand. The reason God told King Saul to destroy all the Amalekites is because the race of the giants came out of perversion. And so anywhere God sees perversion, he destroys completely. The reason Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed is because God saw perversion. And then today they come to a country and tell the country, we will give you certain kinds of visas if you allow LGBTQ, because LGBTQ is perversion. In fact, recently, because I began to attack the LGBTQ movement, Facebook began to mute my videos so that my videos can no longer have views. In some countries they off it. No matter what you do, your views can no longer grow. They mute it. So even the systems that we use have been infiltrated by demons. You now discover they want to kill your visibility because you are beginning to attack sensitive things. And somebody else is deceived, thinking that I feel like a woman. A man says I feel like a woman. He doesn't know that spirits are involved in manipulating his emotion. Because the more perversion takes place, the more the door opens for evil, iniquity, and darkness to enter a city. They are enthroning principalities. And so legislators need to look into these things and begin to raise utterances in the spirit that will shut it down. That kind of Christianity is not the regular Sunday service. That kind of Christianity is a calling for few people that understands divine agenda, because those ones are warriors. They are not necessarily coming to God for excitement. They are fighting to defend the heritage of God. And these are demonic intelligences that shape a city. And if it is allowed, you'll be shocked that the next 10 years and the next 15 years, our world will be completely different. The level of maliciousness, the level of violence, the level of callousness will be different, because something would have gone wrong with the soul of a man, which is the monitor of morality and his walk with God. Even this current World Cup, they had to force the FIFA president to make a statement that included LGBTQ. And one of the board members that was speaking on behalf of FIFA clearly identified himself as a member of LGBTQ. There are many companies today in the world that will not be given certain level of clearance for certain businesses unless their board members, at least one or two, are LGBTQ members. And then you now begin to wonder, what are they looking for? Most of the Western countries today, if you enter there, they give the LGBTQ all the right to speak their mind and to propagate their vision. But you, who is a Christian, if you propagate your own vision, you are prosecuted. So what kind of justice is this that allows certain people to air their own opinion, whereas you cannot air yours? You now know that princes are at work over time, and believers are not aware that iniquity is coming that can uproot the dimensions of God that a generation should host in the next 10 years. And so we come to church, we are looking for his prophecy, how that there's a new job, there's a breakthrough. You know that we are not growing, because what the devil is doing now, in the next 10 years it may become difficult to pray, because when evil sanitizes the environment, darkness chokes the atmosphere. You need to be strong in the Lord to be able to pierce through the cloud. And if they choke the atmosphere with darkness, they now have authority to shape the city according to their own nature, because every city reflects the nature of the dominating spirit. Same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him. Without him was not anything made that was made. So when you find a grace manifest in the Old Testament, it's because the patriarchs met the pre-incarnate beginning with God. All things were made by him. Without him was not anything made that was made. So when you find a grace manifest in the Old